choose your advice. Do your due diligence when it comes to advice. I mean, due diligence can be applied to everything. It can be applied to every aspect of your business. But when it comes to advice, that's where it's more important.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I am your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's also the founder and managing partner of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with patents and trademarks. And today for the Inventive Journey, as always, we're going to talk through a great journey of someone that created and founded a fun and unique company. Name is Ignacio, and he's I guess a bit of an serial entrepreneur, done a few things, and went to really wanted to focus on reducing a little bit of the carbon footprint, as well as making what all of us use is on the paper front of greeting cards and thank you cards, and take that into a much better digital age. So welcome on to the podcast.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you for having me on.
So you're absolutely welcome. Thank you for coming on. So maybe with that, I did a bit of an intro, but I'll turn it over to you to do a much better intro than I can ever do. So maybe introduce a little bit about your journey and where things got started and what brought you up till today.
Sure. Well, the journey started 1,000 miles away from here. I'm a natural citizen of Spain, and I was born there, raised there until I was about 30. And then, I've been in insurance company, working my way up in food distribution and manufacturing. And one of the companies I worked for sent me here to the States to do something. It was supposed to be like a 6-month project that has become a 20-something years already in this country.
A little bit longer than a short 6 months.
Yeah. And so, I studied my MBA here, and after that, the government of Spain, in the year 2000, just hired me to work for the Commerce Department, and I stayed there working in Florida, in Miami, but really taking care of the industries of Spain for the entire United States. So I started working with everything from publishing to media, television, movies, education, everything that had to do with the service sector industries. Back then it was, the 2000s, so everybody was happy, money was flowing, and the digital transformation was taking place. And so, I had the great opportunity of being in the best country for that, right? So I started seeing that transformation taking place in all these industries, and got a lot of sense about the needs and the offer that was out there for every single of these industries. Working with the Spanish companies that wanted to come here, that wanted to do something, and started to export, because you remember in 2008 it was the whole explosion, and then budgets got constrained, and everybody from the digital transition became a digital need for a lot of companies. And so a lot of Spanish companies decided to try to export, and so they used to come to the to the office, to the Commerce Department office in Miami, and explain their projects. I was lucky enough to be able to travel a lot through the United States to congresses, conferences, trade shows, and things like that. And so I was very much in tune with the American consumer by then. And so I started studying all these industries from the inside, giving advice and to Spanish companies that wanted to establish themselves here. And about that time, I was a very late adopter myself of technology. I don't even remember if I had a Facebook account by then. I still have my BlackBerry. I'm so happy with my BlackBerry, and everybody was like, "There's a thing called the iPhone," and I was like, "What?" And so, you know,
I'm a Samsung guy. I like Android. But I didn't even know that Blackberries were still around. I thought they went bankrupt. So that's news to me.
back then, you know, was a thing. I mean, again, I was still hooked up to my BlackBerry, and I used to fly. You know, I was looking both sides, you know, and everybody had, you know, iPhones and Android phones, and I was like, who the hell is going to use that? And so yeah, I was a late adopter, but you know, slowly but surely, I became aware of you know the major shift of many of these companies, you know, and we're talking about 2008. So there was a crazy company called Netflix who wanted to the poor subs wanted to bankrupt and do something against I don't even remember the name. Yeah, Blockbuster, and so you know all these things started to taking place, and I started paying attention and all these things, and seeing the disruption from the inside, and seeing the disruption of many well-established companies by just common sense, right? By just, you know, applying technology in a sense that, or in a way that was fit to the needs of that time. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I was doing there. You know, my daughter was born in 2008 too. She was an Obama kid, not literally, but we started going to parties, and we started to go into birthday parties and start celebrating stuff. And so I remember at that time, there was this printing company from Spain who landed at the office, and they were making high-end greeting cards, you know, like the fanciest stuff, you know, $5 up. And they were like, yeah, because we do that, and we wanted to export, you know, greeting cards to the U.S. And I was like, and I had no idea about this industry or what they do, or you know the type of money that they, you know, that they make. And so, you know, as I always do, I do my research, and I went to the numbers, and I was surprised. I was surprised about how much it's a $20 billion industry. You know, very high concentration, and then I started to look at the you know at the carbon footprint that they have, and I'm a, you know, a nature lover and a person of the outdoors.
Before we jump into all your stuff, which I think is very interesting. So when you got into looking at, so I guess a couple of questions. What makes a high-end greeting card? And I'm probably the opposite end. If I usually go and see which one is the cheapest one that has the right message on it, I buy that. So what is a high-end greeting card, or what makes up a better greeting card?
Well, it was just the material. It was just the fact that they had, you know, a high-end paper, like a much, you know, thicker paper with a lot of graphics and a lot of design. And these are, you know, for like weddings and baby showers, things that are, you know, very, you know, it's not like a typical birthday party or birthday, but they were much more in the high end. So that's what, you know, these people were making. And there's still companies, especially in Asia, some others in India, who are specializing, here in the States too, who are specialized in that type of card. Yeah.
So how many, just one other question, I didn't mean to hijack your journey, we'll certainly get back to that, but just curious, because I never really thought, I use greeting cards and, you know, birthday cards and thank you cards, but I never really thought much about them. So is it a pretty competitive marketplace? Is there a lot of players in there? I know Hallmark is one that I always see, but that's the only one I probably can even think of. But is there a lot of players or a few players? Is it pretty centralized, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a very concentrated industry. There are like 3 or 4 major players. Here in the States is, of course, you name them, Hallmark, American Greetings, which was, you know, UK Greetings. And there are another 2 or 3 major players in Europe and some in Asia. So there are local players for obvious reasons. You know, the green cards don't maintain value if you export them unless you do it in massive quantities, because local manufacturing is much more cheaper in other places. So so yeah, those are the major players. You said them. And then there's a lot of minor specialized players who are now trying to make an inroad in the industry, which is more about, you know, handmade design, something especially for you, which are some people who are also calling us and offering us their designs to put on a issue. So, we're starting to think about those ideas too.
Okay. No, sorry. So go ahead. So you have all these major players. You now kind of had first heyday of industry, and then things start to get kind of pulled back as you get into, what is now 2008, 2009, and the housing market's crashing and money's getting tighter. And with all of that, you decided it was a perfect time to start your own business, right?
Yeah, with all that, we started to get a much less activity in the commerce department, and we were like, we're getting bored, actually. And so my daughter, like I said, was born at that time, and we started to go into parties and starting to see all these, craziness with the green cars and cars that were, thrown away very next day. So it was in one of those parties where I see, you're attending. You just received a visit from a company, a printing company, and you see those cars and things that start to, go around your head. And so, yeah, I decided, I said, there's gotta be some more value. Got together with a psychologist, a friend of mine, and a sociologist, which is another guy who I know from many, many years. And they told me, the value is in the signature, in the handwriting. But there's also a tradition component behind it. There's a tradition of going to the car and the effort of somebody going to the car and getting in and signing it, and that's the value of it.
So what it's not just the thought that counts. You actually have to do something. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're people are walking to issue as opposed to just sending a Facebook message, because a Facebook message is just says, I remember.
Yeah.
But when you take the time to write something and to doodle something and to attach a picture and even your voice, then it becomes much more meaningful. And so, I started to think, what is the substitute value of something that is so rooted in tradition, because it's going to take a while to convert and to have adoption in something like this, and what would it take? So we started thinking about, okay, what if instead of sending the card from me to you, which is an e-card, something that hasn't been successful because of the lack of value, obviously from something that is made up. What if instead of that I put together the dedications of your 20 friends, or all your classmates, or maybe everybody who wants to say get well, and that might be part of your network, or that might be people who don't even know you, but they want to say get well and donate, make a little donation. So we started thinking about putting together voices, putting together dedications, putting together gift contributions, and putting together images. And so there was a lot of putting together. So we started piece by piece. We were a small group, and we started piece by piece, and we started working with the voices first, then with the signatures. It took a while.
So it's hard to do that, because if I remember right when I talked, and correct me if I'm wrong by all means, don't have much of a technical background or programming or software background. So I get you had this idea, right? And putting words in your mouth, but you had the idea, hey, we're going to now look to make what it is, greeting cards that people like to send, or thank you cards, or whatever cards it are. Now make that over to digital. And first you learn from the industry, e-cards don't work. If all you do is just send out an e-card and type a message in, or have it automatically generated, doesn't have the heart and doesn't have the touch and the feel, doesn't make people feel, like you're putting thought into it. And so then you say, okay, now we need to actually bring in that human nature back into on the electronic platform of doodling or signing or making colors or drawings and pictures and video and whatnot, and maybe also give contributions. So you come up with that idea. So now how do you move into implementation? Because if you don't, that seems to me a lot of software play, right? And a lot of platform, a lot of programming that. So how do you start to make that transition to, hey, I've got to find people that can build this for me?
Yeah, no, that was the step, right? The step is, okay, so from idea to go to something that is going to work. and something that can be finished into making a product that not only works, but it also fits, the markets and the taste of the people. So, I started to look around and see, who can advise me, who can guide me on this, because I was like totally blind, and I didn't know anything about infrastructure, about frameworks, programming languages, nothing at all. Plus, this hadn't been done before. Mm-hmm. So if you put those things together, it's even more complicated, because there was people talking about many different technologies that could work, but I wasn't able to judge those technologies. I wasn't able to say, okay, what you say makes sense, but instead of going with React and Node, we're going to go with other different type of language to make it work faster, to make it able to exchange between the backend and the front end, because we're going to need that. So there was a lot of trial and error. And the 2 first years, I was advised by somewhat that it wasn't the right person and the right group. And so it was 2 years in the garbage practically. And so we developed.
When we talked about that, you also had to make a pivot, right? So I think you mentioned that you originally kind of more did an app and it was on the phone, and you thought, hey, that would be a great platform. But then, I won't steal too much of your thunder, you can fill it in more. But if I remember right, you kind of said that was one where people downloading an app for just a single use, and hard to get people to adopt for, hey, I want to send a card, I want to do a quick thank you. Now I got to download an app, figure it all out, and do a one-off, and then I'm not going to use the app for a while more. So that kind of also sounded like it was a pivot. Is that recollection right?
That's exactly right. That's one of the main problems that we had was to just set the basis wrong. And from when you set the basis wrong, it doesn't matter what you do later on. If the bases are wrong, the bases are wrong. And the bases were made into apps, into an Android and an iOS app, because everybody was making apps at that time, making apps was a thing. And a lot of people started, were having and downloading every single thing just to try it. And so, we decided to go with apps and having people to download an app to make a card, but also download the app to sign the card. And so that didn't go well. It didn't go well because when we had the product ready and started to test, even though the functionality was working perfect and it was, very, very nice, well built, and the experience and the flow was very good. The fathers, the mothers, the teachers, everybody was saying, listen, I don't want to have to download. I love it because I love the result. And it was for the teacher, and we have to do it for the teacher, and we'll do it. But it's a pain having to download an app, signing in, putting my email and everything else just to sign a card. I don't know when I'm going to sign the second card. I don't know if it's going to be in 2 months or in 2 years. So, one of the things we do very well in WizU is we listen. And so once we had that feedback from 3 different people, we made a small focus group, and sure enough, 90% of the people said, downloading an app is too much. It's too much of a hurdle. So we said, okay, so we're going to have to.
But I mean, because that, without letting you jump too quickly past it. So if you, because by that point, I think you said you've been in there, 2+ years in developing and putting in the time and effort and everything else. So it wasn't just, hey, we spent a month on this and we got to start over. It was a good amount of time, effort. Oh, yeah. You had the app going and everything else. So couple of questions in there just to dive a bit deeper. So, one is, how did you get, and no offense by any means, man, but how did you get, 2 years in and, not realize that this was a problem? Meaning, was it a lack of, hey, because, I'll freely admit, I do the same thing. You start to drink your own Kool-Aid, right? You start to think, hey, this is awesome. Look at all the features we can do. Look at all the cool things we can do. And you think everybody will love it as much as you are. And one thing I've had to learn myself the hard way, so that's why I said I'm not picking on you because I've learned the exact same lesson, is sometimes you want a focus group. You want to go out and actually, as much as I hate the term minimally viable product, and the reason I hate it is not because I don't get the idea behind it, because it always means, it sounds like I'll put out the worst product as quickly as I can and hope people like it, which I never liked that idea. But it is almost that idea of let's get a product, focus group it, figure it out. So, did you skip over that step? Did you not think about it? Or where was the disconnect for the couple of years?
I would go into deeps with you to ask you how would you make that focus group, because I bet you if you make that focus group, the first thing you would do would be to download the apps and have the phones ready. So that was much more fundamental step. The fundamental step wasn't the functionality, which is what 99% of the focus groups, focus on, is the flow, how do you do it, and that wasn't the problem. The problem was a much more fundamental problem. It was what type of platform, and
No, that's a very good point. I don't know that I would have probably done the same thing. You set up the focus group. You're saying, hey, let's see how they like it. Let's test it out. We got all the phones ready now, try it out. And you almost miss that step, which is probably the big step, but I would have probably done the same thing.
Yeah, and we did it, and we did focus groups as far as functionality goes. We did focus group, and that's exactly what we did. And the people who we did it with, that was the first thing they did, was to, okay, let's download the apps, have the phones ready, and then give them to whoever is going to use it, and then get that feedback. And we missed that fundamental step: is what is the real platform. Plus, at that time, browsers were not as so developed that they will offer a very nice a functionality as far as what we wanted. So we have to say also that when you try Chrome, I'm talking about many years ago, didn't have all that functionality built in, and they were much more they weren't behaving as well. When you use, for instance, Chrome in an iPhone right now is pretty much seamless. You can use it and they work perfectly. And back then there was still a lot of protecting my platform, and so you had a lot of problems having to adapt the product to different browsers. Would have been, not that I thought about it and discarded it, because I'm not trying. That was a big mistake, but even if we had tried, there would have been a lot of problems trying to adapt something in a web application that will work across different browsers.
So it sounds like, Ferdy, almost you're danged if you do, danged if you, in the sense that if you would have tried to do it on the web platform when you very first started, web wasn't far enough developed, it didn't have the functionality, and yet you do the app and the app didn't work. So it was almost a matter of timing wasn't good. Timing wasn't on your side when you initially started. It wasn't until afterwards, when you figured out that the app wasn't work, then the website had caught up a bit more. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. But of course, there was a lot of other things that we were developing at the same time, in the back end and the voices and everything else. So it wasn't a complete waste of time. But yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
So and I'll quit peppering with questions, but I find it interesting. I'm gonna ask one more. So when you got to the point and you're saying, okay, as much as we love the app, we think it's really cool, it has a lot of great functionality, and once they downloaded it, everybody loves it type of thing, but you have the problem of getting them to download it. How did you decide, okay, we've got to pivot, we've got to change, we've got to do something different in order to react to the market? How did you make that decision?
That was a hard one. And that had to involve not only myself, but, my family, my investors and everybody else. We have to really sit down and say, this is what happened and what are we going to do about it? And so, there was a lot of wows and a lot of, how can you do this? And, but yeah, it was a matter of moving forward or just stopping and going back to, to a 9-to-5 work or doing something different. And I wasn't ready for that. And I'm no quitter. So, I said, we're gonna do it, and we just need to change the team. The team that we had was a team specialized in apps. They're all over the world because I've had developers like in probably 10 different countries, but we had to find the right development team for the web app. And so that took another 2 months of interviews and flying but finally we got a team that was able to translate pretty much everything that we have on the apps into a web app and that will work and that gives, customers and users a nice experience. And yeah, that was a hard decision to make. Yeah.
No, I can imagine. Like I said, that pivoting is never easy. And the farther you get into a product, the harder it is to pivot because you already have so much time, effort, resources, and everything else into it that the farther you get in, you try and talk yourself out of how can I adjust the product rather than pivot, right? So I fully appreciate that. So now fast forwarding till today, you made the pivot. It's now online. You do the web portal. How's it going? People like it? Worthwhile pivot? COVID's killed it. How's it going?
It's going very well. We've been so busy, especially since COVID. My wife was joking and said, it took a global pandemic to get your product really appreciated. And I'm like, yeah. But the truth of the matter is that we're working with more than 400 schools that have done, from graduation cards to birthday parties birthday cards and class birthdays, hospitals, companies that now are much more decentralized and delocalized, and they're working, with Wish You to celebrate, to, thank you, to, retirement cards, attaboy cards for a job well done, of course, birthdays. And so it's super busy right now. We had to migrate because our servers weren't working 100% because we were, prepared for a whole bunch of traffic, but not that much. And so we had to migrate these last 2 weeks that we've been migrating servers to a much more, large server in AWS. And so it's quite busy. It's very busy. This morning, we had a conference with a huge organization who wants to implement with you for pretty much everything. They want to do a lot of different types of cards. Now, without even asking for it, we have people in platforms like Fiverr and some others who want to sell our cards. So they say, what if I buy cards from you and then I personalize them, can I sell them? And we're like, yeah, you can sell them. So there's a lot of things that we didn't anticipate, and they're happening right now. People who are calling from India, from Pakistan. Yesterday maybe before yesterday on Monday, I don't know. There was a whole university in Pakistan that wanted to do like graduation cards for everybody, from now on, like every year, because families are everywhere nowadays, and everybody wants to have the signature of grandpa or grandma.
No, that's cool.
And so yeah, it's super busy right now. We're very thankful, and the feedback that we're getting is what keeps us going. I mean, the feedback, you should see, the type of feedback that we get is really remarkable.
No, that's awesome. That's a cool story. So if I were to do now we've done that, you've finally made your pivot, starting to go well. As you said, it took a pandemic for everybody to want to get in touch, use your product, which I think is a great pivot, or, don't want to profit off of the pandemic by any means, but I think it was a good way for people to understand what the importance of your product and how it could be used and how it could connect people. So now you look at it, say, next 6 months to a year, where do you guys go? What's the path you'll take?
Well, we'll continue growing. We don't see demand now getting back. I mean, now we have hospitals implementing that as part of their cards for patients, which is like a little meal that works, continuously, and we have a lot of those meals now starting to work. Schools that the principal says, and I want to donate my birthday to the PTA. And so the principal makes a card, everybody signs, and everybody makes a little donation. And because on Wish You can place a donation website or a PayPal account, we don't get any commission from donations or anything. People get sent to the actual website where, where donations are gathered of that particular school or PTA or PTL. So those things are becoming really popular. Teacher Appreciation Day has been huge. I mean, we've been having teachers' cards like amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, we see continue working in the same way, continue working with the schools, hospitals, companies, and of course, people like you and me who have kids.
Mm.
And yesterday was somebody who have was like a kid animation company, something like that. These people who come dressed in Frozen or whatever, and so they wanted to celebrate, and they normally go to places like gymnasiums and places like that, or particular homes, individual homes, and they were like, okay, we have all this data from all these kids who we've been celebrating birthdays for 3 years, and
Mm.
we wanted to continue doing that, and you invite people into that card. So everybody who signs, if you put your little logo or your contact information, all these people get, all of a sudden they know who you are. So if you're the character and you are, Elsa from Frozen, and you make the card for this kid, and you put, contact me here if you need me, 20 people are gonna sign the card. They're gonna keep it because if you sign it, you have access to it, and that's your business card right there. So that's another thing that we hadn't even thought about. And somebody comes along and says, "Can I use it for this?" And we're like, "Yeah, you can use it for that."
That's a great idea.
Yeah. We're like, okay. So there's a lot of these things that come every day that we haven't even thought about, and it's very surprising.
Well, that's cool. That's exciting. So, well, we're hitting towards the end of the podcast, and there's always more things that I want to hit on, and never enough time to do it, unfortunately. So maybe we'll have to have you back on. But I always have my two questions I ask towards the end of the podcast. So we'll kind of jump to that part of the podcast now. So, and maybe we've already touched on them a little bit as we've talked throughout. But the first question I always ask is, what was the worst business decision you ever made?
The worst business decision I ever made was probably to assume that because I didn't know technology, the people who knew technology at that time were also good enough to interpret the business dynamics around that technology. So it's one thing to know technology very well, but you have to know your customer and your user, and to have that avatar really well defined if you really, really want to make a product that fits. And because the new technology didn't, that app that we were talking before, and that part of selecting something that was not in tune to the needs of the consumer, that was my biggest mistake. And so technology is technology. It doesn't mean that the people who know technology are the best ones to advise you or to advise anyone in business decisions.
No, and I think that's because a lot of times I work with in different businesses I do, and I mentioned serial, do run and co-founded several businesses. I think you're absolutely right. You have some people that are great technologists. I mean, they can code great, they can make great products, but doesn't mean that they're doing it based on what you instruct them to do, right? Meaning if you tell them, hey, I want this and this and this, they'll make a great job of it. Doesn't mean that they're the ones that are going to tell you this is how you should do, or they shouldn't be telling you either way. This is how you should do it, or this is what's going to work in the marketplace, or this is what customers are going to like, or anything else. I think there's a bunch of different skill sets.
I agree 100%. Sometimes it goes beyond, because sometimes for them, a type of technology for them might be more easier to code, or easy to work with. And so, but that has a lot of business impact. So I give you an example, that in which when you make a dedication or sign a card, you can animate it. So, when you click it, the animation comes, and then you see that person, how that person signed. So that is a technology that is contrary to a static image. So we had a whole discussion, I remember 3 years ago, about what to use. Should we use this or that? And for my developers, it was much easier to work with the static images. It's much more standard. We have all the technology over there. But at that point, I already had made my big mistake. So I said, no, we're going to do it this way because it's an added value to the card. And if we have to work a little harder or find somebody who is an expert on this, type of technology, we'll do it. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you that you have to keep them, separate. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to jump to my second question. So second question is, so somebody that's just wanting to get started in the startup, just get going, or just barely started their startup, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Choose your advice. Do your due diligence when it comes to advice. I mean, due diligence can be applied to everything. It can be applied to every aspect of your business. But when it comes to advice, that's where it's more and more important. So, the same way you go to a doctor and he's a doctor and it amazes you about his knowledge and everything else. And then if it's something serious, you go to a second doctor or even a third. This is the most serious thing probably that you're going to do in a few years. So don't go to only one doctor, go to several doctors and listen and put together that. And that is the best. I mean, this is not anything new. We've heard this, many, many times in other places, but that is something that you cannot skip. And then after that, have a communication is key. So get people who you can really communicate with. Language cannot be a barrier because, then there's a lot of interpretation. And I develop a whole system on Drive to communicate with my developers, and it's very graphic. And it has a lot of arrows that come back and forth and little tags here and there. So, when you have people who are native speakers or bilingual, make sure that you communicate graphically, and anything you want them to do, explain it, but then, put a graphic to it and say, this is the way I want it, and do your little doodles or whatever it is. But that saves a ton of money. Yeah.
So if I were to summarize, almost saying one is get a second opinion or a third opinion or a fourth opinion, but don't just take the first opinion that you get, especially if it's something critical to your business. Make sure that you educate yourself, or at least have a good enough foundation within to make a decision as to what will be best for your business. And then two is to communicate graphically. Make sure that communication is not a barrier and that people are well understood and you communicate things well so that then they can execute on it, which I think are both great pieces of advice. Well, if I were to do it, so as we reach the end, want to make sure that they know how to reach out to you, whether it's they want to use your product, they want to be part of your company, they want to invest in your company, they want to just reach out to you for whatever reason. What's the best way to connect up with you?
Best way would be Ignacio@wishyou.com, wishyou as wish, and then YOO.com. And, that's my email. That's the easiest way.
All right, perfect. We'll make sure to direct everybody your way. I think your product sounds like a really cool one. I can certainly see why it can make a difference, both on carbon footprint as well as connecting everybody up. So thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been fun to talk through your journey. For everybody else that's a listener, want to invite you to certainly subscribe to our podcast. If you're listening, you can hit the subscribe button on any of the platforms. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, just go to inventivejourney.com, apply to be a guest on the podcast. And if you're needing any help with any patents or trademarks, certainly feel free to reach out to us. We always want to make sure to take care of startups and small businesses. So thank you again for coming on, Ignacio. It's been really fun to talk through your journey, and I wish you the success for your future journey.
Thank you very much, Devin. Thank you for having me on.